Hello YouTube, it's DasGregor, and welcome back to a very strange Linux first impressions. A couple of weeks ago, I was playing around with Linux from scratch, which, if I remember right, I warned you, flee quickly. If you are afraid of difficulty and tedious work. Let me tell you, I've been working on this distribution for a lot of weeks now, and well, little over a week and a half, I guess. Hasn't been too bad. To be honest, the LFS instructions to get you to where you get to a command prompt are so good. If you can just follow them, it's really well worth your time to try this sometime. But at the same time, it was very difficult. LFS comes in a book form that is over 320 plus pages long, at least the parts that you have to read, and you will not boot into LFS until you get to chapter 9. The first time, well, actually, I should say I was successful on my first attempt. This is my first try at LFS, Linux from scratch, and I was successful. If we go to Midori here, and you can see some stuff I was trying out, learning how to add myself from the command line. There are a lot of little things that you get, what do you call, spoiled, we'll say, with GUI interfaces. And there are a lot of little things that I'll have to admit, even as a Gentoo user, that I have, gotten to where I really didn't do it at the command line as much as using GUI applications within KDE, for instance. Now, Midori is, of course, the web of choice with XFCE, and I do have that here. And if we go to LFCE here, or LFS I should say, find the right one here. I'm not too crazy about the duck whatever search engine, but it's the default, and to be honest, it is what it is. The very first thing you want to notice is LFS is your main core. This is going to give you a set of instructions and also a lot of information to get yourself started. Now, I used my Gentoo system to kind of jump into it. I did not use the LiveCD. Now, I have had somebody come to me after watching one of my last videos about LFS and saying they were using the LiveCD and having some trouble being able to extract with tar some XZ extensions, and what we found was the version of tar in the LiveCD did not work. I didn't run into this since I used Gentoo and it worked fine, so I told him to go ahead and try to download and set up the Gentoo minimal CD and use it, even though you're not using it for Gentoo, but just going to use it as a boot setup and get yourself into it. I did not put this inside a VirtualBox, so what you're seeing here is actually everything running on my system. And in fact, I don't even know if after I'm done here if this is even going to be good, because I've been doing some tests, it's been hit and miss. It's very difficult. Inside the LFS, you're going to go step by step, creating from bootstrap to all the way to the point where you're actually going to boot into your OS, compiling the kernel, getting all your modules ready, setting up scripts for booting into it. You're not going to set up, per se, your wireless networking or anything else. That's all going to be in Beyond Linux from scratch, where you'll learn that. And that is even harder, I'm sorry to say, than LFS. So if you're having trouble with LFS, when you get to BLFS, it's not getting any easier. I've gotten Fluxbox working, I've gotten Xorg working, I've gotten the internet working. I've got sound 70, 90%, somewhere in there. Some of it doesn't look too good. And I've got browsers working. I've got the video working. Now, GUVC was not within BLFS. I actually had to download the source, figure out the dependencies, and there are a couple dependencies that are not in there that I had to work around and get working. It was very difficult. Linux from scratch really makes Gentoo a walk in the park. Let me tell you, I will never complain about Gentoo being too slow about compiling or difficult. I don't think Gentoo's difficult anymore. Gentoo is so easy compared to Linux from scratch, because this really gets you into the nitty-gritty of the mechanics of Linux. Let me tell you, if you really want to understand it, far beyond even what Gentoo can provide, Linux from scratch is going to do it for you. Now, I got GUVC working, and we just kind of go over through. Now, this is going to be a bare bones menu because I don't have very much installed, and this is what, this is, I haven't been doing this full time for a week and a half, but every evening after work, I have been compiling to about midnight for easily 5-6 hours a night, compiling code, working on it in my spare time here and there. I did give myself the weekend. I didn't work on this at all Saturday, Sunday, so this is just evening time on the weekdays. But anyway, we've got a terminal emulator, we've got a file manager, we have a mail reader and a web browser, of course, your settings that all work here, mouse pad for text editor, the Thunar file manager. Now, I do have some weird bugs, like if you open up the Thunar file manager, I'm missing icons. I'm sure it's because I'm missing a package or I compiled something incorrectly. You can see all the many different tests in MP4, OGG, WebM, etc., trying to get things to work. But like I said, icons are all missing here. Haven't quite figured out that. I did get shares working, of course, so I can map to my servers, and that seems to be working fine. We move on down. It came with I compiled the Retro image viewer. Everything you see compiled from source. Nothing came with anything. I did get XChat working IRC so I could visit with some people, ask some questions. Although I really have not received, I can honestly say I have not received any help from anybody in regards to LFS and getting to where I am today, other than what I have found as resources on the internet. Most people that I have asked if they've seen this or that, it's been blank stares and, I don't know, this is way out of my league, they say. So, anywho, we move on. Multimedia. I did get the simple screen recorder set up. VLC is, I don't have it right. It works, but the video portions aren't too good. Being able to burn CDs, and then the GUVC. Now I'm going to pause it for just a moment because I hear some noise coming my way, and I want to make sure it doesn't get too loud for you, and then we'll continue here in another moment. Okay, I think it should be quiet, hopefully for a little bit longer while we finish this up. And as I said, I sure hope that it's all working because I want to make sure this is good. As I was discussing within the menu system there, everything you see I have compiled. It's a real headache, and I'll show you some stuff here. So, all of that's right there. Like I said, for some reason, some icons are there. Like you can see the icon there for the things that I've compiled for simple screen and that. But the XFCE is missing some icons, and I'm not sure. There are some things you think, okay, priorities. It's not a high priority right now. I will continue to work on, I think, LFS every once in a while, trying to build it, see if I can get it fancier and better. And maybe someday I'll come back and say, hey, look what it is now. And you can go back and say, yeah, that first video, it was junk, DOS. It was no good at all. Rubbish, man. But, maybe someday I'll have it looking better and we can go forward. Moving on about the documentation and all that, because that is what most of what Linux from scratch is here. You've got LFS, like I said, beyond LFS. Now, there's this thing, I haven't really looked at this automated Linux from scratch, providing tools and all that. Everything I've done manually, step by step. And then the only other one that I would say that might be something to consider looking at is there is a community LFS somewhere, and I don't see it listed here, but I did find it once when I was looking for a package for V4L, and that might be the only other thing you might want to consider searching, because it's very difficult. For instance, with GUVC View and Simple Screen Recorder, I pretty much had to just do it on my own and hope I did it right, which, as you can see, both are working, so I did it, but it took a bit of time. Another thing that really aggravated me was when I was setting up Midori to work. I first tried Firefox, and it was crashing, and that's the first application, I'll admit, first application I ran into that gave me troubles was Firefox. And then I decided that I'll just stick with Midori and go from there, since that's the browser for XFCE. Now, when I went to install that, it said I could install lib, or the WebKit 1.10, or I could install the WebKit 2 version 2. And I thought, well, newer versions are always better, right? So I went with that, did all the installs, and WebKit 2 took forever. I must not have had my make flag set up or something. Everything else would fly so fast that it was taking me longer to type everything in and get everything set up to compile than it was actually to get the package compiled. But WebKit probably took 5 or 6 hours, failed, and to find out what the problem was, reinstall a couple dependencies that I thought I'd already installed, and then it went through. But then when I went to Midori, it came back and was complaining that it couldn't find WebKit 1.10. So I ended up doing that, and that still took another 2 or 3 hours just to reinstall, or actually install the older version too. Once I did that, I was able to get Midori working so that I could continue to function inside of the XFCE and still be able to set up some other things. But if we look at some stuff here, like beyond Linux from scratch, this kind of helps you get back into the newest thing. You can read online, you can download it. 7.5 is what I based everything on. In fact, I was just lucky. When I started this last week, 7.5 had just come out for LFS, and unfortunately, 2 days later or 3 days later when I started BLFS, they still had 7.4. I started building stuff, and then the very next day when I went back to it, they had upgraded to 7.5, so I had some outdated information already and some packages that were not compatible with others, and I kind of had to start over getting things going again. So always watch that, make sure that you're at the right version. But as we can see here, you get into it, and it's all page by page HTML. And what it pretty much is saying is that you don't need to start from the beginning. You can pick and choose what's important. But I kind of found that you have to think, what do I need to set up first? So I wanted to make sure I got my wireless set up, so I utilized this right here to make sure that partitioning and file system management was good. Of course, I'm a Nano fan because of Gentoo. That's what I've used for so long. You have choices though here. And of course we're using the bash shell, so we're not using any of these. So we can skip that sort of thing. General libraries, you don't know which ones you're going to use, but packages will tell you. And then fonts and libraries here. General utilities. You don't see a lot of stuff like I've used them, because I built almost everything as much as I could within Gentoo, and then went into full-time LFS just last night after I finally got Midori up and running. But you can see, for instance, if you're using your wireless and you need WP8 supplicant, you're going to have to install that. You're going to have to install wireless tools. This is where you're going to get this. None of this stuff is talked about inside of the main Linux from scratch. Linux from scratch is pretty much just going to get you from the time that you create your partition to compiling everything to getting to a point where you can actually boot into it. And that's it. Beyond Linux from scratch is your Bible from there on. So you'll want to make sure you get your networking running, your file systems working, everything else. And then of course the big thing is, are you going to set up Linux from scratch to be a server, and then you've got all of these types of servers that it talks about here, or are you going to put Windows Manager on there and go from there? Now I'll tell you one thing, installing Xorg, I think it takes a half an hour to 45 minutes in Gentoo. It probably took me a good 6 to 8 hours just to get all of this stuff installed. And I'll give you kind of a clue here. You go into Xorg, and it tells you, introduces you, tells you what it's going to do, tells you how you're going to have to do it. This is kind of the setup. Now, don't skip this stuff, because you got to set all this stuff up for it to work right, because it's creating shortcuts. And you go into the next one, and it actually starts with your first application. You got to download the application, and then it'll tell you, okay, you need to make sure you have the Xorg build environment set up for this. Always make sure you do that. And then you have to you can copy and paste or retype these things here to build it. And you move on to the next one. That one wasn't so bad. It says right here, okay, you need util macros, which you just did, and it recommends that you have sudo and wget. Now, when it says it recommends it, they really ought to just say, do it. Don't do anything else. Do it. So you want sudo, you want wget, you want to make sure those are there. Now the optional, and this is where I wish they would do something. I wish they would say, okay, if you want blah, make sure in the optional to install FOP, or if you want XML blah blah blah, make sure you install XML2 or ASCII, etc., etc. And this, of course, is saying it's just for documentation. Sometimes though, it'll say that you need something, but it's optional, and you don't really know if you really need it or not until you get to that point. Yeah, that really wasn't optional. I need it. Now, a nice thing here about the protocol headers is it's going to give you a little script that you can use wget to grab all of these files instead of having to do it one by one. And then it tells you how to build all the protocols utilizing this little script here and then installing them down here. A lot of stuff to go through. But then you go on to something like this here, and it's going to tell you, okay, you need the protocol headers to do that. And we'll move on. Actually, let's go back home here and let me give you a real-world example. For instance, if you wanted to install VLC, and I need to work with it to see if it's at the very bottom. I should just scroll on down here. Say you've got all that stuff working, you've got your video working, you want to install VLC too. So you click on there, and it says, okay, here's where you download the package. Now, recommendations is you want to install Lua first, libmad, ffmpeg, liba52, you have to make sure your X Windows system is set up, also libs and libgcrypt. Okay, well, you want to install Lua first. So you go to Lua, and then Lua says, oh, okay, well, you need to have this patch, and then that's how you do it. No problems. Okay, back out, go to the next one, libmad. There's your required patch if there is one. ffmpeg. Okay, here's a good example. ffmpeg says, okay, if you want ffmpeg, you need to first install these libraries here. And then it says, okay, we also recommend that you have a Windows system, that you have also libs, SDL, libva, libvdpau, all of those things, and then the optional stuff. All of these things that you may or may not use depending upon the types of file system or file codecs, etc., that you might want to use. Now, you start installing all these things, and it becomes very, very tedious coming back. And then you forget where you're at, so you got to keep real good notes as to how to do it. And then it gives you these instructions here, installing it, with the making of it, configuring it, and setting up the documentation if you're going to do it, make install, and setting up this. Don't want to skip any of it. Then it, of course, explains what it all does. But as you can see, what one package turns into 3 packages, which turns into 5 packages, which turns into a whole bunch of other stuff. Can become very complex and very time consuming. That's why I would suggest anybody wanting to do LFS, take it in stride, take a little bit at a time to try to do that. Don't try to push it all at once. It took me I took a 6.5 hour break in the middle. It took me about a day to install Linux from scratch, from start to finish, and I pushed through the whole thing. It wasn't too bad. You know, it took the whole evening of one day up, and I'll be honest, I worked till about 3 a.m. because I didn't want to stop, and I should have. And then I worked a few hours the next day, and I had it all done. But this stuff here, you're going to want to take your time and just do a little bit at a time and keep real good notes so you remember where you're at and what you've done. It's the only way to do it. Otherwise, you get burned out very quickly trying to install all this stuff. And I'm hoping, oops, minimize that. I'm hoping that this will stay something that I can continue to do and just kind of work on bits and pieces to make it better. I may even look to see it getting KDE in there. But, you know, I can set up KDE in just a couple hours on Gentoo. I'm afraid what it's going to do for this one. This might take days, maybe even a week to get KDE. I might be surprised, and maybe I'll find a way, maybe I'll get into it well enough to figure out how to use some of the automated stuff that they talk about in BLFS. But we go on here and we see all this stuff, and that's just to get FFmpeg installed. You get FFmpeg installed, you still have to do all this other stuff, and then you have all those extra dependencies that one of these might have, etc. And then of course your optional that you have to make sure, then you have stuff that's related there, and then of course you have all of these things too to deal with, all just to get VLC installed. Now I got bare bones working. It's not working very well because I skipped a lot of stuff just to get it up and running. So you know, you can do that and you skip it, but then you end up with kind of a broken package that doesn't work too well. A lot of work. Believe me, if you do this, it's just because you have a passion to really learn about Linux. But if you do it, follow the instructions, take it very slowly, don't rush through, read everything. It will be well worth it. There is nothing more satisfying than knowing after you've done all of this stuff that it actually works when you're all done. That pretty much describes at least how I went through it. And while there's a lot of stuff not working, I've just been taking a little bit at a time, and you know, I'll send to the guys I talk to on the X chat and all that and say, hey, woohoo, woo woo, I got this working. And you might think it's simple, but no, it's not. And then, woo woo, all right, got that working. All right, you know, everything else looks beautiful. You know, for instance, you know, if we go into the terminal emulator here, I actually have a nice little setup there with that. And if I was to root into it, for instance, you know, got that all set up. And so it looks nice, it's clean, it's crisp. You know, the graphics, everything seems to be working really well. I was really quite surprised that in my first try with Xorg, I got the whole thing, no problems, installed TFM, I think it's TFM, yeah, I think it's that. Anyway, the basic window manager there just to test it, and came up, worked on the first try. I was so happy. It's like, woo, all right, this is great. I installed Fluxbox next to see if that would be fine. That worked great. I did IceWM. That worked wonderful. I did XFCE. Blah, didn't like it. I didn't like it. The system didn't like it. It all installed, but it didn't work right. And that's where I found some things where it said, oh, this is optional, that were not optional. And did a few tweaks here and there. And as you can see, I still have some bugs. One of these days I'll figure that out and we'll move on. But it's nice, it's great, and we're 24 minutes almost into this thing, so I'll try to end it because who knows, I could be talking just to myself right now and this might not even be working because I've done so many tests. I think I got everything good. So thank you for watching, whether it's morning, evening, noon, or night, whatever you're having, enjoy it. I will continue to play around with LFS here in the background. If I ever get some major breakthroughs, I will try to record an update and throw it out there. But this is, I really wanted to do LFS as one of my distribution reviews, just for grins. It's it can be as big as you want it or as little as you want it. I just think it's great that you can actually build it all from the ground up, kind of how Gentoo used to be. And I remember when I first started with Gentoo, you had to build your bootstrap and go from the ground up pretty much with that as well. And I remember the first time I went back to installing it, and it's like, where's the tar 1 or the stage 1 and the stage 2 stuff? You know, and they got rid of it and made it just stage 3. And I was like, oh man, I mean, it was hard to do it at stage 1. Even stage 2 was difficult, but kind of felt like I was cheating when I did stage 3. It is what it is. So until next time, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy this, and hope it turns out. I hope the sound volume's good. I will hopefully, test this out in my other Gentoo box, the video portion, and we'll do what we can to make the sound louder if it's not loud enough. Hopefully it's not too loud, but we'll go from there. Alright, bye guys.